Newsletters are insanely popular at the moment. It seems like everybody has one. And in today's video, I want to help you cut through the noise, and I want to show you 5 newsletters that are going to make you smarter. They're going to help you become more successful. And if you're a self-development nut like myself, you are going to love them. So let's jump right into it. The first newsletter is James Clear's 3-2-1. So James is the absolute master of habits. For those of you who aren't familiar with James, he wrote a book called Atomic Habits, which is, in my opinion, one of the greatest books of all time. And so in his newsletter 3-2-1, James includes every single week 3 ideas from himself, 2 quotes from others, and then 1 question for you to think about for the week. James' brain is absolutely full of golden nuggets of information. After I read his newsletter, I find myself approaching problems in my life in a completely reframed way based off a really simple insight that he was able to provide. Almost every single week, I find myself taking one of his quotes or his ideas and writing it down in my commonplace book so I remember, or using it as a journaling prompt for that day. When Thursdays roll around, I am legitimately excited when I get that email notification. The fact that I am that excited to read something that takes up 2 minutes of my entire week speaks for itself. Newsletter number 2 is Sahil Bloom's Curiosity Chronicle. Sahil is one of those guys that I first came upon on Twitter. I ended up slowly developing an affinity for his content, eventually subscribed to his newsletter, and to say the very least, I haven't regretted it. Not even in the slightest. So the one thing that I really like about Sahil's newsletter more than any other newsletter I read is the mental frameworks that he includes every single week. Now, as much as I love to get inspiration from a quote or introspection from an idea from another newsletter I'm reading, I truly love the mental frameworks that Sahil puts in his newsletters because it gives me something actionable to do after I read it that week. So I find myself more often than not coming away from Sahil's newsletter really excited to implement a lot of these frameworks. And this is really powerful because I think it's easy to get people excited to act, but it's an entirely different and much more difficult thing to get people to actually act. And Sahil is one of those people that actually gets you to act. And that is something that cannot be taken lightly. The third newsletter is Chris Williamson's 3-Minute Monday. So his newsletter delivers a new insight that he has on life, 3 things that he learned that week, and also a really helpful productivity hack. Chris runs a podcast named Modern Wisdom in which he interviews a wide range of guests across a variety of topics. And as a result, his newsletter is incredibly unique in terms of the content that it houses. So Chris is interested in a ton of topics that I typically wouldn't care about. Things like birth rates, modern dating, relationship advice, societal issues, whatever it might be. I don't typically like these things, but Chris writes and communicates in such an effective way, I find myself more and more engaged every single week. I think the reason I like the newsletter so much is because Chris has these long-form conversations with people, and he's not only able to ingest and absorb all this information, but he's also able to pick out the perfect golden nuggets that he then delivers to his newsletter audience. Newsletter number 4 is The Breakthrough by Mark Manson. Now, I'm sure a lot of you know who Mark is. For those of you who don't know who Mark is, don't know anything about his work, he is an author, he's written a ton of books, but there's one that is extremely famous that I love, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. I have always adored Mark's work, specifically because of his writing style. Mark does things differently. He writes informally. He swears. He says things so bluntly. It was an absolute shock to the system when I first read this book, and I think that that's what set him apart in my mind and made me like him so much. So Mark has a newsletter called The Breakthrough that he recently relaunched. Mark's newsletter every single week focuses on a specific self-help theme. So one week it might be on relationships, the next week it's on anxiety. Maybe there's a week on boundaries or fear. And so in each newsletter, he focuses specifically on that one topic. He gives you a few things to think about, a few things to ask yourself, and a few things for you to try throughout that week. Often when I'm reading newsletters, I find myself getting pulled in so many directions. There's a quote that inspires me right beside an article that deeply moved me. There's no theme. There's no true call to action for that week. There's no one place for me to put all of my energy. And so Mark's newsletter is different. It's more constrained. And I think that there is a true power in that constraint. And the 5th newsletter on this list is World Builders by Nathan Baugh. I believe that writing, and more broadly storytelling, is the most undervalued skill that you can have in the modern world. Everything in the world that you interact with or impacts you has a story behind it. From that movie that you absolutely love, to the Casey Neistat video that hooked you, to the sales pitch you're giving to your boss, everything comes down to your ability to tell stories. A really great thing about the newsletter is that it actually uses case studies from pop culture, which obviously just makes the newsletter more interesting. It's things that we interact with on a daily basis. He almost Trojan horses the lesson in storytelling by delivering you a post from topics like Quentin Tarantino to South Park to Disney and everything in between. If you analyze just about any content creator that you praise or really like the work of, you're going to realize that the things that set them apart aren't their credentials or their experience or their knowledge. The thing that sets them apart is actually the ability for them to share a story that captivates people. And that is what Nathan's newsletter is helping you do 1 week at a time. So those are the 5 newsletters that I wanted to share with you today. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop it a like, subscribe to my channel if you are new. I will see you guys in the next one. And until next time, stay curious.